Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Let's Remember of a great RPG. This is Suikoden III. It is my favorite of the Suikoden series, Suikoden being a series that is actually my favorite JRPG series that is out there. So we'll talk about why that is in a moment. Let's get started with the game. I wanted to let that opening cutscene play out just because it's really exciting and I think it sets the tone of the game very well. So here we are prompted to enter a name for the Flame Champion, which sounds like the name of our protagonist. It is not the name of our protagonist, surprisingly enough. And because I know that, and because there's a name that I always used when I was playing the game, this is what I will put in. I am going to put in Matthias, which I always thought was a very nice sounding name and very fitting for a hero. So, oh my gosh, there's so much that I want to talk about already. A couple things that you should know: that music that you heard before, one of the main composers was Michiru Yamane, who is also the composer for games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night and all kinds of things at Konami, because this is a game that is published by Konami, developed by Konami, which also is why we haven't seen a real proper entry into the series for a long while. There's been sort of side titles, something called Suikoden III, which is taking place in an alternate timeline, and that was for the DS, I believe. But once they hit Suikoden V, sometime in I don't know. I don't even remember when Suikoden 5 came out. It was really, really good. But after that, they just sort of stopped because they're Konami, and that's what they do. Would I like to load save data from Suikoden 2? I don't have save data, from Suikoden 2, unfortunately. Suikoden 2, a great game. Same thing with Suikoden 1. They're all really good. All three are directed by Yoshitaka Murayama, and it's really great. So here is the first major thing that's happening with the game. We have three protagonists to choose from, and they are all going to bear witness to the same events. We have right here Geddoe, who is a member of the Harmonia Southern Frontier Defense Force, so he's a hired mercenary for a very powerful nation. We have Hugo, who is the son of the village chieftain of the Karya clan of Grasslanders. The Grasslands is this big area that is incredibly important to the game. And then we have Chris Lightfellow, who is leader of the Zexen Knights. Zexen, a sort of confederacy nation built off of trade that is right on the borders with the Grassland. So three really distinct protagonists, and you're not locked into one for the game. You are actually playing through the game and seeing events from each of their perspectives, Rashomon style, until they finally all converge. To start us off, we're actually going to go with the neutral perspective of the upcoming events, and we're going to play as Geddoe. This is probably my favorite thing that Suikoden's ever done, because this is a series that's primarily about politics and nations, and it's really nuanced of this title, at least, to give us the ability to see the initial conflict from multiple angles, including two parties that are involved with sort of the tragic things that kick off the plot, and then somebody who's watching it from a distance. So we'll see Geddoe's interpretation of what has occurred, and then we'll get to see Chris and Hugo, who are right in the middle of everything. So we start off with three mysterious figures in front of a fire, one of them saying goodbye to the others. Suikoden is this really rich world. One of the main things about this world is that it has these things called true runes, which there's 27 of them, and each represents either a certain element or a sort of metaphysical force. What we saw there was a sort of the introduction to Geddoe's chapter, and now we'll get here. But talking about the true runes, they are semi-sentient in the fact that they can choose their bearers, and then they grant their bearers not only immense magical power, but immortality as well, which is really, really cool. Geddoe's chapters of this game I really like. They're sort of some of the more difficult ones. If you're doing a difficulty scale, it tends to go Chris is the easiest, Hugo's somewhere in the middle, Geddoe is a little harder. But he starts off with a really nice cast of characters. This is Ace, a bit of a jokester type. This is Joker, not as much of a Joker as Ace. Joker is actually a character that shows up in... there are two visual novels called... basically Suikoden Gaiden, or something along those lines. I forget, but there's two of them. They follow a character named Nash, and you encounter Joker first in those games, about 16 years prior to the events of this game, when he's much younger. This is Queen. She's really, really cool. And that's Jacques. He's very, very quiet and taciturn. Really, like, I feel like this is I want this to be another in-depth sort of look of things, the same way that Skies of Arcadia was, but that had more emotional resonance with me. Here, this is just a game that I think is very, very interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to play up until the incident in question that involves sort of all three characters. And then, if there's interest in this series, maybe I'll continue to do a full playthrough, but we'll go from there. A wonderful thing about this series is that it has a great sense of continuity. So this takes place 16 years after Suikoden II, which in turn took place so many years after Suikoden I. It gets a little trickier because 4 and 5 actually take place chronologically before other titles. The order of the series is actually, it goes 4, 1, 5, 2, 3 in terms of how they occur chronologically. But this also means that there are characters you see from game to game that you get to see how they grow over the course of their sort of experience in this world. And that's something that I don't think you get from many other series. You certainly don't get it from many primary series in the sense that it doesn't span as much time. Suikoden 4 takes place, like, I don't know, maybe even 200 years before this. It takes place a long time beforehand, and yet there are characters from Suikoden 4 that are in this game, and there's all sorts of craziness going about in terms of why those characters might be long-lived, or if they're traveling through time. This is a series replete with, I think that's the word. Let's strike that word off of the docket. This is a word that I shouldn't have used if I didn't understand it. This series has characters that are just ripe for making theories about, like, who are they really, like, what are they doing. It's one of the things I love about it so much. So, Geddoe. There are rumors that the Firebringer once again is making a move in the northern grasslands. Confirm your situation. Geddoe is sort of hired as a mercenary to observe the situations in the grassland because it is on the southern border of the nation of Harmonia, which is this very big, powerful nation. Very powerful because they have access to many of the true runes. You have some character inputs that you can do here. It's never anything too refined, at least in the sense that often in other titles of the series, responses, certainly not responses this early in the game, but responses later on will affect whether or not you can recruit certain characters to a vast degree. So this game and every one of the series, there are 108 Stars of Destiny, which is a concept borrowed from a Chinese novel called Suikoden III. I forget how to pronounce it. It's Water Margin, or Outlaws of the Marsh. And in that, a band of outlaws gather, as one might expect, in the marsh to fight against different forces that are going up against the Empire. They get pardoned by the Empire for their banditry, and then they fight forces on behalf of the Empire. But each character is assigned to a Star of Destiny. There are 36 heavenly spirits and 72 earthly spirits. So in the Suikoden games, you get to recruit 108 different characters. Not all of them are characters that will join your party, but they will all be part of your larger army at the end of the game. And you tend to get the best ending by recruiting all of the Stars of Destiny. This game is a bit unique in the sense that it's very hard to miss any of the recruitable stars, whereas, for instance, Suikoden II has a lot of stars that you can miss because you don't talk to people enough. There's subquests in that game that require you to get to certain places within, 12 hours of playtime, and in these games that's not insignificant. This game takes a lot of the formula that we know, or that fans of the series rather know, when it comes to Suikoden, and makes it a little more streamlined, a little less complicated, and generally lets the player have access to what they need. In this case, too, getting all of the Stars of Destiny doesn't even affect your ending necessarily. It gives you access to another perspective of the story, which is actually the villain's perspective. So if I play through this in great length, I want to play through it so that we can maybe see everybody's point of view on certain events. So I've been rambling a lot. We are going to move forward with the game. Geddoe's mercenary unit is very good. They're very good characters. And so what we need to do now is we are going to visit a Grasslander village in order to get leads about whether or not the Firebringer is returning to the Grasslands. The Firebringer is a group of sort of revolutionaries that fought against Harmonia about 50 years back, and there was a big tragedy involving the Flame Champion, and eventually the war between the Grasslands and Harmonia ended in a ceasefire truce, and that truce will be very important to the rest of the game as we move forward. I won't be sort of reading the dialogue. I'll let it scroll at a pace that seems acceptable, right? I won't let it go crazy. Queen is probably the more responsible of the group, has a cool head. Ace and Joker are a little bit more wastrels. Jacques is very calm. And Geddoe is, Geddoe is Geddoe. And I do not remember how to run in this game, so I need to sit back and, aha, there we go. I think it's just holding down in a direction. No, it's the shoulder button. Right now we are in Vigne del Zexe, which is the capital of the Zexan Confederation. Here are characters, for instance, that I will recruit later on as Stars of Destiny. A big hint in this game, if you talk to people and they have names and portraits, they are characters that you will be able to recruit later on. So we will get out of here, and we'll sort of get to where we need to go. I say get to where we need to go very tentatively. I don't remember my way around this game or this city or anything like that particularly well. And so, I can talk to people, and I know where certain things are. So, like, for instance, I'm fairly certain that this is the entrance to Chris's house. Chris, the player character that we can play as for the Zexin point of view. But if I just follow the outside streets, it'll take me to the entrance of the town, and I can make my way towards the grasslands. This is actually not that hard of a game to find, particularly now that it's on the PSN, but even if you want an original copy, I have an original copy for the PlayStation 2. It's very easy to stumble upon. The one that costs the most is actually Suikoden II, which if you want a copy of that for the PlayStation, it'll cost you probably near $200 just for a copy of it, upwards towards $400 or $500 for an a sealed, unopened version of it, because it had a very limited printing. These are very popular games for people who have played them, even though they didn't seem to get the sort of mass appeal that they, I think they deserved. Suikoden 2 is a game that everybody says is one of the best JRPGs that's been made, but, I don't know how many people making those lists have actually ever really played it. It's just sort of something that has this title via acclamation. And that's fine. I like Suikoden 2, but I think as time moves forward, we need to have access to these games, which is why I'm so glad that more and more of these are showing up on the PSN for people to play. It's sort of really important that we have access to games like this. I particularly find that JRPGs tend to show a very clear sort of progression and authorship to them, so I can follow the works of, Masato Kato, and sort of go from there. That's a save point, I believe, but we're not going to use it yet. Hopefully I won't die in battle. But I can look at sort of how things function from one writer or director to another. So I can look at Final Fantasy VII and see sort of where Masato Kato, I'm pronouncing things terribly, might have wrote things for that game. Meanwhile, I can then follow that to Chrono Cross, and just I have this big piece of work that belongs almost exclusively to him. Same thing with Nier and Yoko Taro. I'm having so much trouble with my names, but I hope you get the idea, is that JRPGs, out of anything within the late 90s to the mid 2000s, are really these games that you can sense a lot of ownership by the directors and the writers. We're just going to travel through this forest, and then we will probably stop. Each segment I want to do for this game is probably going to be around 30 minutes, not as long as what we did with Skies of Arcadia. And this first segment has mostly just been me rambling about the game and sort of what the plan is here. The plan is to play through up into sort of the inciting incident of the main story, and show you how using multiple protagonists and different viewpoints is something that this game uses to great effect in order to stress the political complexities that the game wants to sort of comment on and have form sort of the narrative cornerstone of its game, much like any Suikoden game really relies on sort of politics and sort of Machiavellian plots and broad Shakespearean narratives in order to provide a very enjoyable experience. Here we are running into Maximilian, I say Maximilian, Fred, because I say Maximilian because he is a Maximilian knight, and if you play some of the other games in the series, the Maximilian Knights are these very quixotic individuals who go about trying to fight evil wherever they might go. Here, Fred is very much a Don Quixote figure, and Rico is sort of his Sancho Panza, to a certain extent. But they are a recurring element within the series. There are other organizations and groups that are recurring elements throughout the series. And so when I talk about how this game has a nice sense of continuity, it's in the sense that there's really a nice understanding of, these characters have these characters that have these characters. So here's combat. Attack, defend, runes. Geddoe has a lightning rune. Ace has double tusk. Geddoe's lightning rune, fairly well developed. You also have combination attacks that you can use, so this will use, I believe, everybody. And you can see how many turns it will sort of take up when I attack. These are small, simple enemies. My team is very high leveled. They're about level 20, which is why you're actually supposed to play Geddoe last. So they should be able to do fine here. Your max party size is 6, and you sort of pair off into groups of 2. So this is a nice, easy fight, but shows off... this game has a decent sense of camera work, not quite as strong as something that you might encounter in, say, Skies of Arcadia or other titles. I think the camera in Skies is very basic but very effective. But here we'll show off combination attack. And we'll get out of the forest, and that will be the end of the first segment. So, mercenary attack, go. Jacques shoots. Cross attack. Joker comes in. And Ace finishes off. Strong damage. Very, very cool. You earn skill points in this game that you then invest into your characters. So let me try and bring up the menu. If I want to check skills, for instance, you can see that Geddoe's parrying is D, and I have 80 points to spend. So if I want to, I can increase his parry right away, but I actually might want to increase his damage, so I'll wait until another battle. Everybody just sort of has different stats, and then using your skill points, you level up those stats. It's really great. It's really easy to understand. Magic is easy to understand in this game. I appreciate that these systems are fairly straightforward and easily apprehended, because it makes just sort of playing the game and enjoying the story and the characters that much easier. Certainly battle systems are things through which game designers can really express a certain sense of feeling, a certain sense of urgency, or tension. But I enjoy the fact that things are fairly simple here, in the sense that it's not particularly obfuscated. The combat that you have in this game is fairly approachable, because the story, while not overly complex, relies on understanding a lot of different sort of convolutions and plots between various political factions and things like that. So to have a straightforward combat system is very enjoyable. That's not to say that there's not depth. Depth just being sort of the greatest amount of, elegance rather, being depth with the greatest amount of ease. Depth just being a certain robustness or efficacy, right? So this system has a lot of management and ways that you can really make it work for you, but you have to dive into it a little bit. So we could go to Brass Castle, but we are actually going to head to the Yaza Plains, but that will be in the next segment. If you can't tell by my jabbering, I am so excited to be playing this game, and I hope that you will enjoy seeing these 3 distinct perspectives and sort of the storytelling that comes from that. Thank you very much for watching. I love you very much. I will see you around later.